to it. Chair.
Good afternoon, councillors, officers, members of the public and press. Welcome to this meeting of Children's Services Committee. This meeting is a remote meeting being live streamed on the website and being recorded. I will now hand you over to Denise Winpenny from Democratic Services.
Thank you, Chair. We'll begin the meeting by way of a roll call of all those in attendance remotely. And may I request members to confirm they have a paper copy of the agenda and can both hear and see councillors in the meeting. I'll now begin the roll call. Councillor Hamilton.
I've got everything I need and I can see and hear everybody.
Thank you. Councillor Harrison.
Yes, thank you. I've got everything.
Councillor Lauderdale.
Yes, thank you. Got everything.
Thanks. Councillor Lindridge.
Yes, can see, hear and got the papers, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Little.
Yes to all.
Thank you. Councillor Moore.
Yes to all.
Thank you. Councillor Smith.
Yes to all.
Thank you. Jo Heaton.
Yes, I can.
Thank you. Joanne Wilson. David Turner.
Yes, everything in place.
Thank you. Mark Tilley. Apologies from Mark, I understand. Zoe Wesley, I have apologies from Zoe as well. Was the apologies from Joanne Wilson, I understand, or yeah. And I think that's everyone. Is there anyone else in attendance that I've not called? That now concludes the roll call, Chair. Can I just remind everyone just to keep their microphones on mute, please, just to avoid any background noise unless you're invited to speak. Thank you. I'll now hand back to the Chair.
Thank you. Moving on to item 1, I don't believe we have any more apologies for absence. Anybody to declare any interests? No, thank you. The minutes being held from the 19th of November, everybody in agreement to those minutes? Yeah, thank you. Nothing under item 4, so we'll move on to 5 key decisions, and I'd like to pass you over to Danielle, please.
Thanks, Chair. Okay, so this is a key decision, and this report is about the high needs block 2021 and 2022. So as members will know, we come regularly to update committee on the funding allocations for the higher needs block and also approval for the budget. So what we're asking for today is to inform you of the high needs block for the forthcoming year, but also to seek approval for the budget, which is further down in the report. So the high needs block, just a bit of context, is allocated for children who have got additional needs. And as with other areas of the DSG, that's via a national funding formula. You can see in 3.3 that we've actually benefited from an increase in 2021, 2022. So it's 16% in 2021, but then a 12% increase in the forthcoming year. And this is a second year of increased funding, which is obviously positive for us. As I'm sure members will be aware, we have come in the past to ask for money to be transferred from schools block, but we are not requesting that due to the increase in funding, and the high needs block can manage the budget this year. Bit of background, and I'll go on to that a little bit in more detail further on, but we have started to work on a 3-year medium-term financial strategy, which we will come back to committee about. Just so that we can understand the ongoing impact and the ongoing profile of needs over the next couple of years, because we do think that demand continues to increase, and we need to understand whether the budget can manage the increase in demand. So in section 4, you'll see that the total high needs funding, once all the recruitment's been taken out for the academy funding, which needs to go to academies, is 12.689. As I've just said in 4.3, we're not requesting that there's a block transfer from the schools block. So which is obviously positive. So in 5.1, the budget proposal for 21-22 is set out, which takes into account that full budget of 12.689. There's a couple of amendments that we are proposing to committee that have been discussed at Schools Forum already. So in 5.4, you'll see that we went to Schools Forum for a consultation to increase the SEND top-up ranges as they hadn't been inflated since implementation in 18-19. At the meeting on the 9th of December, Schools Forum voted unanimously to recommend the application of inflation at the rate of 2.75. So what we've done is that we've taken that into account in the budget profile, and we do know that that's affordable because that's estimated at 0.135 million, which we've allocated. The second proposal is around the minimum funding guarantee. And every time I talk about this, I confuse myself. So I know Sandra's on the call. So if there are any questions about the minimum funding guarantee, I'm sure Sandra will be happy to step up. But if members remember, the committee actually approved to implement the MFG arrangement in 18-19. What Schools Forum recommended unanimously is the application of protection of that MFG at 103%, which is an additional 3% above the minimum requirement. So this equates to an overall 9.3% to be applied in just 20 and 21-22, just for 1 year until we do our financial analysis and then medium-term strategy. Again, in 5.9, that is affordable within the high needs block funding as set out above, and that's estimated at 0.178 million. So in terms of section 6, in terms of the risks and the financial implications, there are obviously financial implications to 5.5 and 5.8 as I've just set out, but we can afford them for this year. We have, in order to mitigate that risk, restricted it to 2021-22 while we complete our medium-term financial strategy, which we will come back to we'll go back to forum and then come back to committee. So what I'm asking for members is in 14.1, which is to note the contents of this report, approve the recommendation from Schools Forum to increase the SEND top-up ranges, approve the recommendation from Schools Forum to apply an additional 3% protection for the special schools in terms of the MFG budget, and approve the 21-22 budget, which is set out in section 5.1. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. I move it to the floor. Jim. Jim, you're on mute.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, and I'm happy with the proposals though I see them. Could you just confirm if there's an underspend, would this be carried forward? Because you're building in an element of protection there. Am I understanding that right?
So we do attempt, Jim, to underspend on the high needs budget so that we can pull forward reserves. We don't always, because of the nature of the needs of children and also the change in the needs. So it's quite hard to always project need. For example, we might get a child that comes into an area, moves into an area with significantly high needs, and we would have to obviously review that and make sure that the right provision was in place. So yes, I suppose to answer your question, yes, we do. We do everything possible that underspend is then carried forward as a reserve to support us in future years when demand might be increased.
Yeah, it's highly unlikely there will be an underspend because of the given needs and the extra pressures we've got. But, you know, I think it is prudent to build in that extra 3%. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Jim. Brenda?
Thanks, Chair. I think it seems, Danielle, as though we're in a much better position than we have been over the last few years as far as this is concerned, unless I'm reading more into it than is there. But could you just clarify a couple of things? First of all, in 3.3. So one of the reasons we're in a better position is the way I'm reading it, is by excluding the TPG and the TPECG. Can you just explain what that really means in terms of reality?
You're on
You're on
mute.
mute.
I'm going to bring Sandra in if she's in 2 seconds. The first part of your question is, Brenda, we are better off because we've got additional funding overall for higher needs funding.
Yeah.
But the specifics in terms of those specific grants, I'm going to ask Sandra to respond because
Okay,
she'll be better than
okay.
I am.
All
Yeah.
right, thank you.
No, what we're saying in paragraph 3.3 is that we've actually excluded those grants. So up until this financial year, those grants were paid to us separately. And when they give us the funding allocation, they put the grants in. So by taking the grants out, we've still got a 12% increase. It would have been more had we left the grants in, but we thought
Right.
to give you the like-on-like comparison to remove the grants.
Okay, okay, I understand that. Thank you. And can I just ask one more thing? Right, so I'm looking at 4.1, the chart there, and the recoupment for academy funding. Right, my understanding was that academies funded themselves, funded each school. Is that not the case? So it actually still, some funding still comes from local authority.
Yeah, for high needs places,
Right, for
yes,
that. Okay.
that has to be
Okay.
taken out of that initial allocation, which is why it's a recoupment, and then we get the bottom line.
Right. Thanks very much. Thank you.
No worries. Thank you very much, Brenda. Anybody else? I don't see any hands, just in case I've missed it. No? So can we move to the recommendations, please, and note the contents of the report, approve the recommendations from the schools forum for the SEND top-up ranges in 21-22, also to apply the additional 3% protection, and then approve the 21-22 budget shown in the table in 5.1. Is there any dissent? No? All in agreement. Thank you very much. Move on to 5.2, and I pass you over to Sandra.
Hello, Chair. Thank you. Sorry, somebody was just trying to ring me there. So this is the report which details the 21-22 schools block funding allocation and proposes the school budget shares for 21-22. Just to highlight, this report covers 2 of the forward plan references. So the background to this is the ESFE published in July 20 indicative national funding formula allocations for Hartlepool, and this is the information we use to work with Schools Forum during September and October to model so that they can look to see whether and how the school budgets are going to look. The biggest change for next year is, again, the teachers' pay grant, the teachers' pension contribution grants. So these were previously paid as separate grants, but from 21-22 they've put them into the funding formula for mainstream schools. So what we've done, again at the table at 4.2, we've removed the grant. So it shows that the block allocation they gave us in 21-22 was just short of £71 million. The teachers' pay grant funding is just under 3 million, and so that the net budget that we had to allocate to the schools block is just short of £68 million, and this is a funding increase of £1.9 million, a 2.9% increase on the funding, which is good news for Hartlepool. So looking through the next few paragraphs, for the funding formula, the OPU, which is the pupil-led funding, has increased by 3%, and we've noticed that on the other funding formula factors, which we use to allocate the funding to schools, they've also benefited from increases as well. I need to point out at 4.6 that there's a typo, and I do apologise, that the minimum funding guarantee for Hartlepool should be 0.344 and not 0.304. So this is the difference between the government giving us the national funding formula and how much they think Hartlepool schools should receive. So this is sometimes called the cliff edge, because should the government introduce the national funding formula, the hard formula, then that's the amount of funding that Hartlepool schools would lose. But this is significantly reduced. As you can see in paragraph 4.6, it was £1.3 million, it reduced to 500,000 last year, and now it's down to 344. So hopefully what will happen is if they keep amending the formula, there will be no cliff edge, so that when the government decide to introduce the national funding formula, we'll be on an even keel for Hartlepool schools. Paragraph 5 talks about the proposed block transfers, and as Danielle has already said, we've agreed that there'll be no transfer out of the schools block into the high needs block this year because of the favourable settlement we received. We do get a proportion of the DSG, which is called the Central Schools Services Block, and this funds local authorities for statutory duties and other commitments that we hold for maintained and academy schools. So we had confirmation of a block of £769,000 for 21-22. And this has to go to Schools Forum and they have to agree each of the elements. So if you see on table 5.4, those are the lines that each line has to be voted on by Schools Forum, and they agreed to fund the lines up to the total of £570,000. So the remaining 199,000, it was agreed at Schools Forum that this would be transferred into the schools block for disbursement to schools. So in paragraph 6, we can see that at 6.1, the Schools Forum unanimously voted to apply an MFG of 2%, and this is the maximum allowed. So this is just to protect schools who are potentially losing funding, so that they don't lose, that the funding gap isn't too big. So at 6.2, it shows that we had, with the school block funding that we received, plus the transfer in from the central services block, that there was just under £71 million to disperse. So again, we've took the grant out for a like-for-like comparison, and it shows that the school budget share that we can divvy out to schools as shares increased by 2.1 million, which is an increase of 3.3. And this is mainly due to the fact that we got additional funding off the government and we haven't removed any money out of the schools block to put into the high needs block. So from that, if I can take you to the recommendations, it's paragraph 16, we're asking members to note the contents of the report, to note the agreement by Schools Forum to essentially retain the funding of 570,000 and the residual 199,000 to be transferred to the schools block, to agree the MFG outlined in paragraph 6.1 and note that it's the maximum that can be applied, and that's at 2%, and improve the individual school budget share for 21-22 summarised in the table of paragraph 6.2 of the report.
Thank you very much, Sandra. Passing it to the floor, is anybody? No? Is there, we can go straight to the, sorry Jim, didn't see your hand there.
Just a technicality, or just to confirm I'm reading it right, under the recommendations it said figures can be confirmed to the ESA by the deadline of 21st. I'm presuming that's been completed and this isn't, I'm not misreading that.
Yes.
Is that right?
You're correct, Councillor. And just what we have to do, there's a toolkit that we have to fill in, and you just have to tick a box to say that it'll be confirmed, and you put the date of Children's Services Committee in. And what we'll have to do after this is send a copy of the minutes to the ESFA to confirm that it's been to this committee.
That's fair enough. Thanks, Chair.
No worries. Thanks, Jim. So we can note this report and agree the MFG and approve the individual schools budget. Is there any dissent? No, all in agreement. Thank you very much. Move on to 5.3, which is Julie. You're on mute, Julie.
Sorry about that. The report submitted is in respect of the school admission arrangements.
Can you just do me a favour and move your mic a bit closer to your mouth? You're quite quiet. Thank you.
Sorry, is that better?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. So the report submitted is in respect of the school admission arrangements for the 2022-23 academic year for community and voluntary controlled schools. And in the background is that all admission authorities must set the admission arrangements, and this is usually done 18 months in advance. And where changes are proposed, the admission authority must first consult. And if there are no changes proposed, they only need to be consulted on at least every 7 years. So in section 4, there are some details of the statutory timeline requirements. And moving on to section 5, the proposals and consultation. So it has been 7 years since consultation took place. and during that time no changes have been proposed. However, for the 2022-23 academic year, minor changes to the arrangements for community and voluntary controlled schools are proposed. These are detailed within the report. Moving on to section 5.2. So based on the proposed changes, consultation during the autumn term did take place, and that was for 8 weeks in total. One response was received which didn't object to the actual proposed changes, but did make comment on the current oversubscription criteria. And the points raised and the responses provided are detailed within the report. So the published admission numbers, which haven't changed for each community and voluntary controlled school, is detailed in Appendix 1, which committee are asked to approve. And the admission arrangements, including the proposed oversubscription criteria in respect of just our community and voluntary controlled schools, are included in Appendix 2. So members are recommended to agree to the admission numbers detailed in Appendix 1, and I must stress again they haven't changed, and it's also detailed in Appendix 2. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. Out to the floors, any comments? No? So can we take the recommendations in 12.1? Any dissent? No? Complete agreement. Thank you very much. 6.1, back to Danielle.
Okay, Chair. Right, so this is the childcare sufficiency assessment, and I come every year. If you remember, members know that they've probably seen this a fair amount of times. So the purpose is to provide members with the latest findings, but also for members to approve the publication of the childcare sufficiency assessment, which is attached. So as you'll probably remember, we have a statutory duty to undertake an annual childcare sufficiency assessment under our duties in terms of the Childcare Act in 2006, and then some amendments made in 2016. We've got obviously a quite a large childcare market across Hartlepool, offering wraparound care, childminding, day nurseries, and then a 2-, 3-, and 4-year-old offer that is also offered by schools now, which is really positive and doesn't always happen across the country. So we are lucky that schools take up that that provision. So the childcare sufficiency assessment is attached. I wasn't proposing to go right the way through the assessment, but in section 7, we've identified a number of key actions that we continue to work on. So we know that the evidence shows that children's outcomes are improved when they attend a provision with a provider that is at least good or outstanding. So we continue to work with our providers so that they stay good or outstanding. We need to look at speech, language and communication, particularly because it has been highlighted that children who are entering school in terms of their speech and language and communication are not always school ready, and we're doing some work around that. We are looking at children who have got additional needs and how they can access childcare, because as I talked about in the high needs block, that covers school children attending statutory schooling, but actually there are children who have got additional needs who are actually accessing childcare and their families need support. So we're looking at the costs of that and how we can appropriately meet them. And as a local authority, we need to make sure that the childcare that we've got is sufficient. Information does show us that on the whole, parents are able to access childcare. We don't have huge gaps in terms of sufficiency. However, I'll just bring your attention to section 8.2. Obviously, the pandemic has had some implications in terms of early years provision and childcare provision. A large proportion of parents were working from home, some were furloughed. which meant that actually the demand for childcare has dropped. We're reviewing that and continue to review it. And there is some discussions taking place with government about how they can support registered providers, although we're uncertain what the long-term sustainability of some of our settings look like. At this moment in time, early years settings under the lockdown restrictions are able to be open. So we're continuing to work with our providers to ensure that they are able to provide provision to those children that need it and those families that need it. So in terms of recommendations at section 15, ask that members note the latest findings of the childcare sufficiency assessment and for members to approve the publication of the assessment, which is attached as Appendix 1. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Sue?
Right, thank you, Chair. What's the reasons why the children are not school ready with the speech? And is it improving with us having more access for children who are 2 years plus? Is there an is the language better for those children who are 2 plus? Are the health visitors not doing so many assessments? I know we've had a bad year with COVID and that, but obviously speech and language it should be picked up about 18 months if a child's got issues, like 18 months to 2 years. I speak from experience because all my children needed to have speech and language therapy. But I just think with the children being able to access nursery from 2, it should be picked up from earlier for those children who are entitled to two-year-old nursery places. I just want to know why we're having an issue.
It's mixed, really, Sue. We had an early years review last year, and we're looking at some work around that about the findings and how we can integrate our pathways better. So the health visitors are identifying there is support from speech and language. What I think is probably not working as well as we'd like it to is that the system isn't necessarily working together as well as we would like it to. So things like the integrated 2-year-old check is taking place in some occasions and isn't in other occasions. So that should be a key checkpoint for a child in terms of understanding whether they've got some needs, which early on, particularly around speech and language. So, and there's some examples of that working really well in terms of settings, health visiting services and schools working together, but it's not across the system. So I think what we've identified is that we need to do some more work collectively across each of those different partners so that we can make it better. We haven't done a formal evaluation about the impact of the 2-year-old provision that's specifically in school. It's probably worth us, having a think about conversations with the schools that do run their 2-year-old provision and the impact that has. We've not done anything formally, but I think it would be, useful to hear back from heads.
Can I reply, please, Chair?
Yes.
Obviously, I've got a beautiful granddaughter, and she had speech language delay. But since she's had a 2-year-old place at nursery, language and vocabulary is massively, massively increased. And I take my hats off to the children who she's with. Sorry, the dogs are wrecking the house. The children that she's with and the nursery teachers. And I wish my children had that option when they were 2-year-old. But I'm just saying that I think 2-year-old intervention is working, and thank you. I'm switching off before the dogs.
Thanks. So, Jim?
Thanks, Chair. Part of this may have been answered, but there's obviously an increase in need for speech and language communication at lower levels, especially pre-5. The literacy demand, I would presume, is going to increase since COVID and during COVID, because I presume a lot of the children will be spending times with mums and dads who may lack the necessary skills to develop the youngsters at that age. What type of provisions are we putting into place? Are we expecting a surge in sort of SEN stroke extra support when we get back to schools, when they get back to the norm, which may well be, September, and then we find there's a fallout in communication skills, or demand, should I say.
I think it's difficult to know at this stage. I think obviously schools might have some anecdotal information about when their children have been back in since certain periods of lockdown and what the difference is. I think absolutely. I think there's been quite a lot of discussion nationally about the gap and concerns that those that are being, schooled at home and not accessing, formal schooling will increase that gap for those families who are living in more difficult circumstances. So we've not got anything solid or concrete at the moment, but it's likely that will start to play out, I would imagine, in the next couple of terms, and potentially we will get an increase in demand in terms of that even earlier. So when you're talking about 18 months, 2 years, because we also think there'll be an impact at that very low age and also school age. I mean, one of the heads might like to come in and comment, because they probably know significantly more than I do.
Do you want me to come in, Dave? Or are you about to?
Say, no, I can, if you like, Joe. Just taking us back slightly. So we were just about to start our third year of 2-year-old provision, and through our own internal assessment and evaluation, we've already seen a massive positive impact. With one of the main things is to develop those relationships early with families, which is linked to what Jim's just mentioned as well. So those children coming back to school, because we know the families and we know the circumstances, and we have that relationship, it really does help us support. I guess the early identification of need as well has also helped us engage earlier, I guess, in a child's pathway with those external services, speech and language, CAMHS if need be, and obviously, send and support through with Louise Allen. So I would say on the whole, it's one of the most positive things we did at Rift House Primary School, the 2-year-old provision. The good thing is, for me as a head teacher, in planning to how we support the children, for any type of return, and obviously with remote learning, because we've got that early identification of need and what the children require, it means then it helps me think about capacity and resource in order to support that need much earlier, I guess, than potentially what it used to be on that child's pathway.
Yeah, and from my perspective, I think we've just got to see that those examples you were talking about with speech and language and communication as part of the whole picture, because we know that socialisation, everything to do with our young people's personal and social development is impacted. And I think as well, we've just got to recognise that it's not just our vulnerable families that's the case for. That's the case for all of our young people in Hartlepool, and we've got to collectively think about what we can do to make sure that they are given the opportunities to, I hate the phrase catch up, but to get to where they would have been had they not been unfortunately placed in the circumstances of the pandemic. But yeah, it is important, but the whole picture of them is important.
You're on mute, Lisa.
Thank you very much. Any more comments?
Can I come back?
Quickly.
Thank you, Chair. Just obviously, I know with obviously my own children and how it affected their English reading and writing. If so, with you having the early intervention at 2-year-old, do you think this is improving that child who started 3 years ago in your school, like on the SATS levels? Do you think, like where my sons were predicted 333 because of the language that they had, but they shocked everybody and got 445. So would you expect to be able to bring things in like speech and language in school, and like I got offered places in school through literacy hour? Would you be able to intervene with things like that so that child could get that kind of support and through literacy?
Yeah, I was going to say that, when we talk about speech and language as well, obviously there's an external service, but within our own schools, a number of our staff are trained as specialists in a lot of different areas to support the children's learning. And actually, when I talk about the progress and the positives, it's interesting that when we look at the main positives, it's the progress those children are making who are not quite at age-related expectation, and it's making sure those are the bands who we follow up on, and we make sure that the approach is unique to their own individual need, and that's what we start to see through school. I think linked to a previous, which pretty much they always are these meetings, but linked to what we talked about with the high needs block and SEND, I think it's wonderful that we've got an opportunity now to have a medium-term plan, because as heads and as especially primary heads, Joe, you'll be in agreement with this. The complexity of the need that's coming through the system in Hartlepool is increasing all of the time, and therefore, secondaries and they need to be prepared for this change. But we need to make sure that how we spend and how we resource is appropriate to the need that we've got. I think that there's been a massive amount of work over the last 5 years with local authority and with education. You think about even the work that we did to establishing the funding panels, the work that we did around and it was a massive piece of work that we put in place even to go and evaluate the bands to make sure that they were appropriate for our needs at that time in Hartlepool. And I think we've got, in my experience as being a SENCO, lots of different roles, I think we've got a clearer understanding of the need in Hartlepool than what we have for many a year, I would have said.
Thank you. Brenda.
Thanks, Chair. Just to echo what David said then, I think it's a great thing that there's a medium-term plan. It's always good to have a plan, but to have that actually in place, it's forward-thinking, and I would endorse everything David said there. So congratulations to those involved.
Fantastic. Thank you, Brenda. So can we move to the recommendations, please? Members to note the latest findings in the childcare sufficiency assessment and to approve the publication of the assessment. No dissent? All in agreement? Thank you very much. Can we now move on to Amanda, 6.2?
Yes, thanks, Chair, and hello, everybody. The report at 6.2 is a non-key decision, as you can see. The purpose of the report is to consider a nomination for the role of local authority governor, and the school that applies to is Throston Community Primary School. So, as you're all aware, under school governance, the process for appointing a local authority governor to a school governing body requires the local authority to consider the nominations to the vacancies before they are presented to the relevant governing body for their approval. So the application for this particular nomination and position was in the papers. So hopefully you've all seen that to consider it. So the proposal is that this report seeks committee's decision on the application form that was provided within the pack for the nomination as local authority governor at Throston Community Primary School. There are no risk, financial or legal considerations, but you need to know that consultation has taken place, so discussions have taken place already between the applicant, the chair of governors and the head teacher regarding the skills that the applicant can contribute to the school and the governing body. So again, around other considerations, there are no child equality staff considerations or asset management considerations. So the recommendation today is for committee to consider the applicant as set out in the papers that you've got, and to ensure that you're happy with that recommendation.
Thank you very much, Amanda. Just to say that if anybody needs to discuss it, there are on pink papers and we do need to go into closed session. But is there any dissent on the recommendation? No, all in agreement? Fantastic. Thank you very much. Thank you. We'll now move on to 7.1, Jane Young.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So this is a report to Children's Services Committee. It's a fostering service interim report, and it's from it's a second quarter from 1st of July to the 30th of September. As I'm sure a committee are well aware, because I'm here on a regular basis to share this, we're required to bring a report to Children's Services Committee relating to the activities of the fostering service, and it's part of the regulations that govern the standards and the services that we provide. So, as we just said, we're required under the national minimum standards, and the report will outline some of the key areas in relation to the management and oversight and work of the service. So I think if we just kind of take it to 4.1 in terms of recruitment, it's been a very busy year for children looked after. We've certainly felt the impact of COVID, and it's been a challenging year for children's services as a whole, but in particular, I think for children looked after. And it's demonstrated in relation to the numbers that the number of children looked after we've got, and the placements we've got. I think it's credit, and I think I said this last time, and I'm just going to repeat myself, it's credit to our foster carers. They have definitely stood up through this pandemic and have supported us really well. And despite a significant increase of children looked after, the vast majority have remained within our in-house fostering service, which is something that we've always tried to achieve. As well as that, we have had some positive movement in terms of recruitment. We've had a recruitment campaign, and we've got new carers coming through, which has been particularly positive, despite all the the difficulties of family life in Hartlepool. We've seen an increase in inquiries for fostering, and we're hoping to have a net increase in relation to our foster carers as well, which will certainly help without any shadow of a doubt. You can see from 4.8, in recognition of the foster carers going over and above, we have given them a one-off payment to support the additional demands that they're needing to do. And certainly when we've looked at that in terms of the saving that it's brought to the council, it's demonstrated very clearly that remuneration and acknowledgement of the significant work foster carers have done has saved the council money, as well as we always say, we believe our in-house foster carers provide the quality, and that would always be our preferred choice for children to be placed. 4.9 gives you information in relation to recruitment. 5.1 fostering panel, again, I have to acknowledge the work of the fostering panel. They have been very, very busy in this quarter, and actually they might have been even busier in the last quarter, so I think you'll see that very soon. We are very fortunate to have a committed group of panel members. They definitely go above and beyond. If we need to put panels on in short notice, there is always people willing to do that. And I have to say, credit in terms of it's not always easy in terms of technology, but I think we've maintained the quality of that decision making, and I'm confident of that decision making and the quality around it. So, and I think that's testament to the real commitment that fostering panels are effectively voluntary members. So it's really important to acknowledge that. We have had some in 0.6. We've had some changes in the staffing of the fostering team due to maternity leave. We are back up and running in terms of some, we're fully staffed, and we've also in the last quarter, which we'll report on in the future report, agreed some investment particularly to support around connected care assessments and special guardianship support, which we hope will certainly improve the quality of the work that can be provided to our carers, and actually increase the number of carers who are willing to take special guardianship orders, which are permanent orders for children outside of local authority care, which is we always strive to achieve. So in terms of recommendations, it's for Children's Service to note the report in relation to work the fostering service. And if anybody has any questions, I'll try and answer them.
Thank you very much, Jane. It's I do take my hats off to the foster carers having to the way that they've been able to deal with the pandemic and, you know, put the children first. I think it's an absolutely fantastic organisation. I just pass over to Jo.
Hi, thanks, Jane. I was just wondering when I was listening to you there, and it's really important that we acknowledge, I think, as you put it, what the fostering panel do. Is there a way as a committee that we could write a letter of thanks to the members of the fostering panel, or something that would just kind of put on formal record an acknowledgement of, like you say, such a valuable, important job?
Yeah, I think the committee, we can write a letter on behalf of the committee to the fostering panel to say thank you for the fantastic work that they do. There's no problem in that.
Thanks.
Brenda.
Thanks, Chair. Yes, as a member of the panel, thank you very much. But I actually, it's a privilege to be on the panel. And as Jim knows, because he's been on in the past, there's an awful lot of reading to do, but it's really worth all the work and effort that's put in. And they are a very committed group, I would suggest. But the whole fostering service needs acknowledging for the fantastic work that they do anyway. But they have stepped up to the plate. You know, social workers have had to be very creative in the way that they've dealt with their families and children. There's a lot of different ways of going on. And the only thing I would say is that we're still on Skype. Hello? We need to be on Teams, but we're still on Skype, but we have managed. And it's really, as I say, a privilege to be part of that. But a big acknowledgement to the whole service for the fantastic work that they do. And you're quite right about the foster carers as well. And the fact that there is still coming forward during this time, I think is a, you know, credit to those people. Yeah, thank you. Thanks,
Fantastic.
Jane.
Thank you, Brenda. So the recommendations are to note the report and to write a letter to the foster care.
Jim's got his hand up.
Oh, sorry, Jim.
Sorry,
I didn't see that when I looked at Brenda's name.
I think I'd just like to endorse what Brenda said. I think we've got a fantastic foster caring team, and we're fortunate to have so many dedicated foster carers across Hartlepool. It's really demanding, and the reward in itself is probably more personal, and people don't realise the amount of hard work that goes in. You know, it's really demanding. So obviously, it needs to be endorsed. The fact that you want to send letters, should be getting a letter every week. Actually, could I just ask on 6.2? Did you say that you're actually on the connected care assessment as an agency social worker being considered? Have they been employed, and if so, when would it be expected if they haven't? And is that potentially putting a stress on other workers in the team?
They have been employed on a sessional basis to pick up the assessment, so it's not a full-time agency worker. But yes, they have been employed, and we've just commissioned some of the connected carers assessments that were outstanding. So it's always challenging, Jim. I won't shy away from that. The demand is great, so every day we're juggling to make sure that we can meet our statutory timescales, which are really, really challenging. The court are expecting the assessments which don't always fit with the timescales of the statutory guidance, so there's sometimes a bit of rub. So we've been as creative as we can. We are very mindful of not overstretching workers, but so we've commissioned some out, and we are looking to bolster that team. We've got that that funding secured, and we've got adverts out now, so we've got a longer term plan to support the team as well.
Yeah. Could I ask you, just it's really important in terms of we all have a collective responsibility to help each other. How are you actually building on the relationships within the team? Obviously, when we're on teams like this, I think some of the strengths there when you're talking together in a group, you can have feedback and downtime and chat with each other and get things off your chest. It must be really difficult to do this on Skype or Teams, you know, I'm sure you're aware of that. You know, have you
Yeah.
put anything extra? Or can you put anything to support the staff to
Yeah.
that level?
To be fair, I think that you could say the same for the whole service. It has been really challenging for us. You will appreciate that we deal with some really difficult situations, and you know, individual social workers have to listen to some really upsetting and horrific stories, and you know, the emotional support that you get from your team is vital. So we've got regular meetings in through Teams. All of my social work teams right across the board meet as a team kind of every other day. So there's a lot of contact. We try to where it is safe to come into the office, we're doing that on a rota basis. So there is that personal connection as well. We've been looking at actually trying to get them together as a group, and we're having conversations about when we can safely do that, and looking at some supports around from our ed psych team in terms of they provided some really good support at the first lockdown, and we're going to have some conversations with them about that in the next few weeks or so. It's challenging working remotely. I you know, and I'm not saying it's just for us. I'm saying right across the board, people find this really challenging, and I do think we have certainly had discussions around how we support the mental health of our workers, because and our foster carers for that matter, because you know, for a foster carer, when a child goes out in terms of to have some family time, you know, they worry about the spread of COVID and everything. You know, there's some really challenging situations that they're dealing with on a daily basis. But we've got risk assessments, so working through them in a planned way, and we're talking to our carers to make sure we are dealing with any issues that they may have. So we are very much aware of it, and having conversations about how best to deal with it. But I think, like most people, these are really challenging times emotionally, aren't they?
That's great that you're taking care of the emotional well-being of the staff, because without the staff, they can't care for the carers and everybody else. Thanks, Chair. That's it for me.
No worries, thanks, Jim. So we can move to the recommendations, to note the report and to write a letter. Any dissent? No? Everybody in agreement? So we move on to item 8 of any other business, and I would like to pass you back over to Sandra.
Thank you, Chair. So members will recall that this committee agreed in November to submit a disapplication request to the Secretary of State for Education regarding funding for the statutory duties in relation to maintained schools. And it's to confirm on the 20th of January 2021, the Secretary of State confirmed that the request was successful. So this is the 5th successive year our request has been successful, and it's secured just under £300,000 for the council.
Oh, brilliant.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sandra.
Thank you.
That's it for today. The date of the next meeting is Tuesday, the 2nd of March at 4 o'clock. Oh, sorry. Brenda, sorry, I didn't see it.
Lisa, can I just mention that among our midst, there is someone who got, I think it was an OBE, was it, Joe? Sorry, but we have an honours person in our midst, and I think that Joe Heaton, who got an OBE in the New Year's honours list, deserves acknowledgement from us as a committee for the great work she's done in education, which is why she got the award. But I think it also indicates that there is a wider acknowledgement of the good work that's done in education throughout the town. So well done, David, as well.
Yeah, and I think we'll give it. Yeah.
Oh, thank you, Brenda. No, thank you. Yeah, and I was quite proud because it said for services to education in the North East, and lots of people didn't get that bit on, and I'm really, really proud. Hartlepool born and bred. It's where I come from. It's what I do, and yeah, that made me really proud. But thanks, Brenda.
Fantastic. Yes, thank you very much, Brenda. No, well done. Yes.
Yes.
Amazing. Fantastic. So thank you very much, everybody, and we'll see you again on Tuesday, the 2nd of March.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone. Take care.
Bye now.
Bye.